when I should have left myself alone. But I couldn't have, oh no, I couldn't have. I always open my gut when I shouldn't have, oh no, I shouldn't have.
Thank you very much, my friend. Neighbour. Soon to be neighbour.
Yep.
Mate, I really appreciate you marking some time out, especially so early in the morning, to talk to a stranger.
My pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation.
Trauma informed. How did we get onto that path?
It's both a personal journey and a professional journey. I have this quite epic life story that actually I think millions of people have similar stories, where I got really lost in the mental health system and in the healthcare system. And I lost so much of my life because no one understood that really I was just deeply traumatized, and the trauma was manifesting and rolling and decontextualizing through the pockets of my mind and through all the systems of my body. And it wasn't until I kind of exited mainstream systems and started to explore what is beyond that, that I began to heal, and understanding trauma and understanding how it shaped or caused this deep adaptation inside me and the way I experience and the way I respond to the world. That was the thing that took me out of the storybook where I was this dysfunctional, sick human that had no hope, and emancipated me and gave me the chance at a different life. Soon after that, I started retraining and working as a therapist, and I just kept seeing hundreds of patients, both as a therapist and then also within the greater clinic, who were experiencing similar. They had this rolling trauma decontextualized, and it was being treated in all of the wrong ways. And all of these well-meaning clinicians or practitioners who really had best intentions and wanted to help were actually making it worse because they didn't really understand a trauma-informed approach. And so I think it was then that I realized, okay, we need to move the needle. We need to have a rotation or a pivot in the way we're understanding the human experience, particularly when it comes to mental health, physical health, and relationships. Those are the three realms where trauma really plays out and alters our experience.
We like to deal with them segmented, right? We like to separate them and be like, yeah, these are three different issues. We're going to have three different people, and they're more than likely never going to speak to each other. And you're like, well, they are all in one person. So that means they're connected and like physically speaking. And also this one person is going to have to deal with all three of those plates spinning at the same time. And then, you know, you're given this pill and that fucking thing and da 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 da. And it's usually they don't work very well together. And then you sat thinking on your couch one night and think, what do I do? You know, are we all actually fucked? Is that the thing? I think when we look at the old mainstream media or modern medicine, which is fantastic, don't get me wrong, like we've cured many diseases that used to wipe us out, and now we've cured it. We've got you know, problem solved. But we look at it, and it kind of paints this picture of like we're this fragile being that needs to rely on all these different crutches so we can just kind of breathe and get by. And I think we're a hell of a lot more resilient than we give ourselves credit, but we also don't do a good job of looking back, right? That's why this trauma informed really sparks my interest, because it's like, well, you've got to go back to untangle the web. And people don't. They're like, oh, it's done. It's over. And it's like, well, no, we're just like piling shit on top of shit. It was like, you got to go and clean that wound out a little bit and then figure it out from there.
It can be so easier to internalize dysfunction. I'm the problem, there's a problem, and this is just how it is. And I think that is what our society is built on. And then we're sold all of these different ways to fix our dysfunction. And you're right, in the end, we have to go back to the imperfect perfection of our humanness and understand how we have developed and how we have adapted and course correct. So healing is essentially about understanding the path that has been traveled and getting really conscious and intentional about altering that path through action, through interaction, and through the way we receive ourselves.
Used a really potent word there, sold.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do live in the era of capitalism, and it's a big contributor to the reason we are collectively finding it hard to heal from trauma, because we've turned each other into products, and we're having to figure out how to sell ourselves, and then everyone else is selling something too, and so the whole world is one complex transaction right now, and transaction is the opposite of healing.
So what do we do?
I mean, I think the structures of our world aren't going to shift anytime soon. It's about understanding and getting conscious with what we choose to buy into and what we don't. And it's hard. So for me, it's a daily practice to figure out, what am I buying and what am I selling today? And what am I saying no to today? How am I retaining my soul and my humanity today? It's hard in this world. But I think more and more people are starting to question this. I'm feeling right now there's this huge collective existential inquiry of, I don't think that what we're being sold or the world that we've created is really what we want. And so I see so many people questioning, how am I going to shift the blueprint of my life? Whether it's to get well, whether it's to help my mental health, whether it's to have better relationships, whether it's not to be working for a low wage, 60 hours a week. There's this question of, I don't think I want this anymore.
I hope so, and I hope it becomes a bit more widespread. You know,
It's happening. It's happening.
I hope so, and I hope it's not just pockets. Because you see the opposite of that, and you see the glazed eyes, you see the
Yeah.
zombified humans just walking around. You're like, well, guys, we don't. You don't have to. You don't have to do that. There is another way.
If I'm being like, I don't know whether to say jaded or just like grounded, there will be polarization. There will. So there will be more and more people opting into healing and transformation and disruption, but there will be more and more people who become more trapped in the mainstream path that is. And I think sitting with that and processing that and grieving that and raging that is essential for those of us that are choosing to disrupt the world as we know it and to disrupt the self as we know it. Because we, as those who heal, have a tendency to become wounded healers where we want to hold the weight of the world above our head and we want to change everything for anyone. And actually, we propel ourselves back into a cycle of burnout and back into a cycle of self abandonment. So I do think that this honoring and grieving and raging is essential.
Hmm. I think about the age-old quote, "How do you change the world? You change yourself." I think about that a lot, right? With the whole "let's hold the world up," because you really can't make every horse drink the water. You can show them where that lake is, but you can't do it for them. And even if you did, it would be doing them a disservice because now they're dependent upon that hand. And you really just have to, okay, well, it's the guy staring back at me in the mirror. It's the one that comes back after the night out. It's that one. You've got to figure out that one, and you got to hold yourself accountable. And the 2, 3, 4, 5 people around you in that circle. I was like, right, we are now accountable to each other. And eventually, the theory of dominoes, the whole thing's going to fall. And we're not talking about like mass change and fuck capitalism, fuck all this. It's like, well, no, because there's a lot of benefit, and we don't have to just swing from polar to polar the whole time. If we look back through history, it's on a pendulum, right? It goes from one thing and then it shifts to the other, and it shifts to the other, and it's like, well, it's kind of like we've developed amnesia. It's like we go through 100-year cycle as it's taught in the old history books, right? And it just looks slightly different. It's like, well, do we have to do that? We don't.
In my book, I have a whole section on the swing of the pendulum. Um, And you're talking about like the mass collective, but I'll bring it now to the individual on the quest to heal from trauma. So, what essentially happens to us when we are traumatized is we'll get stuck at one end of the pendulum. So, we're playing out a self that is desperately seeking safety in all the wrong ways and creating a paradox where we create anything but safety. And what happens when we realize the way we're existing and the way we're creating our world is hurting us is we'll unstick ourselves from that pendulum and we'll quite often go all the way to the other side. And because we want so badly to not be in this reality that we're going to make damn sure that we're not. So we go to the other side and then we stick ourselves there. And so what you're talking about is sort of that from, a macro perspective and a collective perspective. And what I sort of write about and teach when it comes to the self is to know that the swinging is required to find equilibrium and to find homeostasis and to find peace. And so it's important we notice when we tend to do that and actually allow the movement. And when we allow the movement, we will feel quite crazy because we'll be like this one day and this one day and up and down. And we might get a diagnosis of bipolar if we're not careful. And we have to hold the space for the pendulum to swing and eventually settle in equilibrium. And when we're in equilibrium, we feel safe and we're no longer rushing to alter our reality anymore. And that's when we can make really conscious, intentional, and intuitive changes and steps in our journey.
And that space is a hell of a lot more creative as well too, right?
It is, and it's not driven by fear. It's driven
Mm.
by trust and intuition and responsiveness and receptivity. The thing is, individually and collectively, we don't know how to hold the space when we're in fear, when we're in terror, and then we react to it. We can think about it individually, we can think about it socially, we can think about it politically. When we're terrified, we make terrible decisions, and we don't know how to hold ourselves in the fear. And one of the questions we can begin to ask is, yes, I'm feeling afraid or I'm feeling terrified right now, but am I safe to feel this? And if we can just hold the space and sit with it rather than act from it, what most commonly happens is we begin to metabolize it and it reduces. When we can't hold it, we'll either make a terrible choice or action, or we will cling to someone or something else to try and regulate. And that is the reason for really harmful relationships. That is the reason we get into bad job opportunities or business deals, because we're trying to equalize or reduce our sense of fear, and it never really works when we let it lead our choices.
That's a beautiful point. We cling to someone. It's like manufacturing stability, right? Rather than trying to allow yourself to just let yourself breathe a minute. You'll figure it out. You'll find that homeostasis. It will come.
The thing is, though, if we have developmental trauma where we were never offered a safe dynamic, usually with our mother, but our mother and father, we won't know how to regulate. So we learn to regulate ourselves and find that stability and safety through being taught it, ideally with a safe relationship with our mother in our family unit. And so if we've had zero experience of the relational, I guess, co-regulation, we won't know how to do it alone. And so when we go into these really highly distressed spaces, we do not believe that we can regulate. And therefore, we will seek it out in other. It's actually a normal human response to find another to seek safety. It's just that it's very baby-like, it's very childlike. And so part of healing is learning, well, how do I choose the safe people and how do I create boundaries so that I don't become codependent or be using someone as a crutch or to plug holes in my pain? And so this relational work is probably the main thing that I teach in all of these different dimensions. How do you relate with these healthy boundaries where we're giving life to each other rather than sucking each other dry or projecting or transferring those trauma wounds onto each other?
I often think our definition of maturation is all messed up, because it's purely physical, right? Your balls drop, you grow a pair of knockers and it's kind of it. Well done. You're an adult now. And it's like, well, I think most of us are kids in an adult's body simply because we've not actually developed through exactly what you've been saying. And I, again, everything is based physically of like this meat sack. I was like, but we all bleed red and we gotta have something else involved with this. I think the meat sack is a physical manifestation of the actual person inside, whether you believe in soul, whether you believe in before or after, it doesn't matter. Like I think there has to be something else. It can't just be like, oh yeah, this thing, and then it's just like the combination of your brain firing, as some philosophers will say, oh, it's just brain activity, and that's what we call consciousness. I don't think so.
So many of us are little traumatized children walking around in adult bodies. And
Yeah.
if you can imagine like a 5-year-old getting in a car, running a business, um, deciding whether to have peace or war in the Middle East, that's actually what's going on. And the other really interesting thing is we are all fragmented and we all have different parts. And so when we are traumatized or have unresolved trauma, maybe some parts of us do develop, but some parts don't. So, for example, we might have a part of us that can make really good, healthy, logical decisions about money and finance and career. But when it comes to relationships, we have no idea. Or there might be a part of us, if we've had to grow up really young, um, or had something interrupt our development, we might have no idea how to play. We might
Mhm.
have no idea how to dance with the world. That's a part of me that I'm still working on. And so as we heal, we have to learn where am I, which parts of me are underdeveloped, and how can I let them almost catch up. The trip that I was telling you about earlier, that's part of me letting my 20-year-old self just fucking have some time, right? Because she didn't get a chance. So we're so
Drop in a
complex,
bottle.
and we love to simplify ourselves, and polarize ourselves, and we're such complex, incredible beings.
Why did your 20-year-old self not get time to dance?
When I was 17, I had this misdiagnosis of bipolar. And I had 4 years of being in really difficult, awful situations. I
Mm.
wasn't financially safe, I wasn't emotionally safe, I wasn't relationally or sexually safe. Like all these awful things happened. And then I got out of it at 21. I met my then boyfriend, who became my husband at the time. And at 24, the trauma started to speak through my body. And so I got really sick for 11 years. So most of my 20s was spent in hospitals, and in bed, feeling sick and trying to go to work and suck it up anyway. So I didn't have that playful, joyful, experiential phase. And the last few years, I've been traveling the world and working and teaching and meeting new people and experiencing. And so it's feeding that part of me that didn't get a chance. And it's been really confronting, but also really beautiful.
Yeah, I think that is really beautiful. It's a stage you might have missed out on, but it was just delayed a little bit.
Yeah.
And
And we can always go back and claim experiences or feed parts of ourselves that missed out. Because
yeah,
one of the big things with trauma, I mean, there's so much grief involved, so many different layers of grief. But one of the layers of grief is for, I never got to do these things. What if I did travel the world? What if I did fall in love with someone? What if, what if, what if? So we don't have to live in what if and that regret. We can say, well, I didn't get something I wanted. The other side of grief is desire. Our grief is showing us what we desire. And as we heal and we reclaim our impulse and our agency and our choice, we can have whatever we want.
the other side of grief is desire. I've not heard it put
Mm.
that way before.
I think
Huh.
that grief and desire are part of what I call the arc of grief. So when we are grieving either something we have lost or are about to lose or something we do not have. And the grief shows us this is something I wish for, this is something I desire. Unfortunately, most of us get stuck in our grief and the loss, and we sort of stagnate there because we don't let it flow, grief is part of human experience. I grieve daily. I'm such a crybaby. But it allows me to be like, yeah, this is something I want. And because I'm now connected to my impulses and I've built a life with quite a big amount of agency, I can take it. Unfortunately, with trauma, two things happen with our agency. One is that we often find ourselves living in a paradigm where our choices are very limited. And the second is we often are living in a state of functional freeze or dissociation. So either we're totally disconnected from our impulses and our desires, or we're connected to them, but we're immobilized. It's like we're emotionally paralyzed and we're not able to move forward. And so when we do a certain level of healing work, and this piece is very somatic, like it's in the body, we come out of freeze and we come alive and we reconnect to our impulses, and then we go, then we live. That's what healing is about. It's about learning to live.
I got a question.
Sure.
I'm sure you've come across a bunch of people, and I would bet both my balls that most of them are dudes because we're idiots, who go, oh no, that's not for me. That, that's a bit of the squishy stuff. That's like a bit hippie. That, nah, I'm all right. And I feel like I had the privilege of being cast into this on my own. I spent 3 years in the South Island in New Zealand. There's not many people there, and I had a bit of a crazy time down there. And I spent a fucking significant amount of that time literally on my own with a cat. And I had that privilege of, well, you're thrown into this abyss, mate. You've got to figure it out, or you don't, and you don't breathe tomorrow. But you have to figure this out. And I find that we retreat back into our little groups that allow us to be a little, oh yeah, oh no, I don't feel that, oh no problem. You do. You just have you've stopped the ability to express it and to truly feel it, and we become these like numb children in adults' bodies. Anyway, let's get to the question. How would you go about talking to somebody like that, and I don't want to say forcing them on the journey, but allowing them to actually walk upon it?
I don't think you're going to like my answer to this, because this is an area I've been working in for a while. In the end, we need to check our egos,
Oh, 100%.
men and women. And it's not my job or anyone's job to get someone onto their path. All I can do is come back to my embodiment and also my boundaries, that say, I'm not going to engage with you, whether it's an individual or a group, if you're going to keep being an idiot, or if you're not willing to listen, then I'm going to take my energy and my voice or my heart or whatever way I'm relating, I'm going to go where I'm welcome, and I'm not going to try and force it. And I think it's that sometimes the kindest gift we can give someone who's really sort of stuck and just they don't want it. The thing with healing is you've got to want it. You've got to choose it. Otherwise, it's not going to integrate, and we're going to play out transference and counter-transference, and we're going to loop with each other, and we're going to cause pain. So sometimes the best thing we can do to support someone's healing is to walk away. Like if they're truly not ready and they don't want to listen, okay, well, I'm not playing this game. I'm not playing this game where I try to become your teacher. Um, and with the whole man-woman thing, and this area is something I'm very interested in. I'm writing my next book about it right now, love, right? Where we are in humanity right now is that men are looking for teachers or toys. That's the stage of masculine evolution that most men, not all men, are in right now. Like a lot of men deeply want healing, but when the woman becomes the teacher, it will set off this whole maternal transference and counter-transference journey. And it's not equal. There's no equity. And if a man wants a toy, I'm going to play with you for a minute, and then I'm going to fuck off, and traumatize you. But we need to move the needle. And I do think my spiritual perspective is that the collective masculine is a few years behind where the feminine are, in terms of this level of healing, but it's about giving patience and about giving men a chance to do this level of healing work. That has been harder for them to access because of all of the conditioning, all of the patriarchal conditioning that's been put on men to be a certain way and to be strong and to not show their feelings and to not do healing work. There is this shift, like there's men like yourself that are going into the depths of their aloneness and healing, and there's more and more men's work groups that are popping up. So it's going to happen. Um, and I guess for me, I have to check myself as a teacher, as a therapist, as a woman. You know, I'm on the journey of love as well, to not go into the role of teacher. I'm not here to heal or cure. I'm here to show up with my embodiment. Um, and let you know what is okay and what is not okay in terms of the way you relate with me. And if I can pull back my intention there, that's when shifts happen. But they have to come without the agenda of, I want you to change, I want you to heal, I
Yeah.
want you to be a certain way. Because the moment I do that, the moment there's agenda in any relationship, there's shadow. And my job is to not create shadow. My job is to illuminate it and say, see, this is you and this is me. And again, it's that boundary that ignites the most incredible healing. It's just that it might not have the outcome that I might want. So there's this piece around surrendering agenda and surrendering outcome. It's hard, especially when we project onto each other. So we might meet a person and we can see the potential. We can see how amazing they could be, or we could see the potential of how great this dynamic could be. And the moment we play to the potential, we fuck ourselves. So it's really hard work.
See it in sport all the time. You know, the talent and the work conversation, and you can get a kid who's all the talent in the world, and it's like, well, if they're not willing to actually do anything, then it's over. Like, it doesn't matter what you give them, it doesn't matter what you try and teach them. It's over. You gotta have that little seed inside of you, and I actually
I
love
think
your
it's
answer.
about, oh, thank you. I was going to say, I think it's about intention
Yeah.
and capacity. Those two things must exist. So there's got to be intention to heal, intention to change, intention to grow, and there's got to be the capacity to put the energy to it. And often one or both things are missing. And without those two ingredients, all the potential in the world, all the love in the world means very little, unfortunately.
Mm.
And again, we come back to grieving that and raging that.
Mm. Yeah, you have to have that pull factor from inside. Intrinsic is 100% stronger than an extrinsic. Extrinsic, you get desensitized to it too easily. Especially now, like, attention span drops. What's the attention span? It's not for TikTok. It's 1 point something second or 3 second or something crazy.
So
You're like,
bad.
oh, now I got to go do this. It's like we've given ourselves a bit of like ADHD or something. It's like, well, okay, well, we need something to pull us out of ourselves. It's like continuously, oh, this is why I get up in the morning. You hear it all the time. You got to want it. I was like, yeah, well, you kind of do. Because if you don't, there's going to be a time where you drop the ball, and then that becomes a habit and you're not going to do it anymore. Like, you need to understand why you want to do this. And then you got to do it. You got to meet us halfway in the road, right? We can't go over and just grab you and be like, it's okay, I'll hold your hand because I got two hands and a billion people trying to hold it. It's not going to work. It's funny you
Yeah, I
say,
think,
sorry, mate. I was just going to say, it's funny you say the same thing. I was interested what the answer would be like from a therapist perspective, because, standing up front teaching adult PE, getting people to move around, most people are focusing on the body, and it's also our job to plant the seed or maybe open a conversation of like, maybe we should think about the mind as well, because we're connected by this thing for the fucking neck, right? We these things come one of the set. We need to open up that conversation. Hence why I made this bloody thing. And it's funny because I'm like, well, we're in a great space. Because it's like, here's a dumbbell, put it above your head. I was like, guess what? If I do it for you, I've done it. You've not. So it's like a punch in the face every morning, every evening of like, oh, I have to do the work. Right. So we're kind of lucky because we're in that space where it's very much physical, and we can show people you did the work, it's on you, well done, you reap the reward. The other way around, if you're, a therapist, we don't necessarily have access to a dumbbell, you're not making people do burpees on your floor. That I got a lot of empathy towards, because I think that would be bloody difficult to get that little penny drop moment of like, you've got to do this, mate. Just because you paid me doesn't mean I'm going to give you the result.
You know, sometimes the reverse has to happen. Sometimes we're so used to pushing ourselves to do and to keep going and to forge on and to grow and to climb the ladder that actually what's required, at least temporarily, is to stop and to contract. So we talk about going into the contraction. So when there's this huge resistance to doing and to growing and to getting better and bigger and that climb the mountain mentality, which I'm not sure if it's healthy anyway. What I would support someone to do is to come into contraction. Well, what is it like to actually not do that? And to almost like curl up in a ball. And sometimes I will get people to do that, to curl up on their side into a fetal position and get under a blanket and have a heat pack. And you know what often happens then is one of two things: either the outpouring of so much grief or the rise of the biggest anxiety, the fear that has been propelling. And sometimes there's this sort of breakdown, release, transformational moment that allows for almost a reset, and then new impulse is born. Very slowly. And it's like being a naked baby in the world again and figuring out, well, where does my impulse actually want to go? Because so often we're not connected to it in the first place and we're overriding what might be natural. We're doing what we've been told, which is to lift harder, get stronger, climb the ladder, do more, be better. And I'm not sure that if most of us reconnected back to the spark of our humanity, I don't believe that that is what we would choose. Um, if we were reconnected to the spark of our humanity, we would go slower. We would play more. We would dance more. We would love more. We would create more. Um, but the world we have built and that we're living in doesn't support that.
It's definitely been something that has been shown by life to me in recent times, and it's that last one, we would create more. And I find that creative environment and spirit and playfulness opens up so many more doors. You love harder, you laugh harder, you have a better time. You can relate to people a hell of a lot more. It's like you actually open all doors to life, and you can actually truly live. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? But if we don't create, we have an inability to actually feel in the depth of we potentially could.
The life force is creativity, and love is creativity, sexuality is creativity, all of it. But in the world we live in, there's not much space for it for most. Though I do see a lot of people who are on their healing journey, who are at this existential pivot point in humanity, are returning to creativity. And it's after, for many of us, a life of moving away from creativity and moving towards what's good and solid and respectable and what's going to earn the most money and keep us safe and what's going to validate us. And I just think more of us are realizing that that creativity is essential to feeling alive and to feeling like it's okay to be here.
I think so too, mate. And I hope more and more people can feel that. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. This has been fucking epic, mate.
Thanks for having me. It was a really textured conversation. I enjoyed it. Good luck for your move
Thank
to
you very
Sydney.
much. Thank you very much. Maybe we gotta do it over a coffee next time.
Yeah, happy to. Let me know when you've landed. I'm around until the last week of July. Then I'm off for 2.5 months to write and teach.
You enjoy that time.
Thank you.
All
All
right.
right.
Have a
Thanks for
great day.
having me.
Thanks, boss.
Bye.
Speak soon. Bye, everybody.